Hey, I hope you're having a good week out there. It's been a while since I did one of these random thoughts episodes, and there's some interesting news around Spain these days. So let's talk about some of the top stories. First off, I don't have anything to say about Iran, except that my wife Morena always tells me I'm pronouncing it wrong. I don't know. I grew up hearing Iran. What can I say? Iran. Whatever. With that out of the way, let's get to this week's big stories. A famous Spanish singer accused of sexual assault, and the future of Greenland. We also have the European Union's foreign policy weakness, a quote by C.S. Lewis, and more. Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 129. Thank you very much for listening. If you would like to support this podcast, just head over to expatmadrid.com/donate. expatmadrid.com/donate. That's the donation page. You can send any amount you want. It all helps. I'm also open to sponsorships, but only if your product or service is actually interesting to people who might be listening to this podcast. I get all kinds of sponsorship offers that are just stupid. So get in touch if you want to talk about that, or head over to expatmadrid.com/donate to make your donation. I appreciate it. Let's get on with the news. Several months ago, I wrote about famous Spanish people. One of the most famous Spanish people of all time, it turns out, is the singer Julio Iglesias, who until that point I had never really listened to. I feel like Iglesias was maybe a cultural reference from my dad's era, just something he would mention occasionally, like Little Abner comics and whoever was hosting The Tonight Show before Johnny Carson. I never really paid much attention, and it's not like we had Spotify back then. Anyway, today I have the sad duty of informing my loyal listeners that Julio Iglesias has been canceled. Here's the story. A couple of women who worked for Iglesias in his mansions around the Caribbean have recently come forward with allegations of sexual assault. This was published in eldiario.es yesterday after a long investigation by that paper, along with the US-based TV network Univision. The allegations are from 2021, when Iglesias was 77, and they are pretty gross. I don't want to get into the specifics, but you can read about it on the BBC. There's a less gross version on the BBC. There's a version with all the lurid detail also on The Guardian. A lot of stuff is paywalled these days, but those two outlets are not. Also, I keep using the word paper to describe these large media websites. I'm not sure why. Anyway, today in Spain, La Vanguardia, no relation to The Guardian as far as I know, says that there might be more allegations on the way from other women. Only time will tell. For now, the case is under investigation by the Spanish prosecutors. Apparently, the Audiencia Nacional is able to prosecute crimes that occur or allegedly occur outside Spanish borders. I am no legal expert, so read up if you're interested. Otherwise, let's move on. The other big story this week is Greenland. Yes, the long-forgotten island near the North Pole is suddenly newsworthy. Of course, Greenland has been blown all out of proportion in our collective minds by the Mercator projection maps, which make it look practically the size of South America. It is big in reality, but not that big. Today, the Spanish news is about how European countries are sending troops to Greenland. A show of strength, I guess, to dissuade the Americans from trying anything silly. The interesting thing is that if you read the articles, the numbers of troops in question are ridiculously small. According to La Vanguardia, in fact, the total for this European mission is 33. That's 13 Germans, 2 Norwegians, an unknown but obviously tiny number of Swedes, and some French soldiers. The BBC is calling that bit a 15-strong French military contingent. In other words, it seems like the Europeans are preparing a pretty underwhelming force here. But that's the top story in the Spanish news today. The second story, incidentally, being that the Spanish military might also get involved in the protection of Greenland. I kind of doubt they will, but they might. I asked my friend Chris, who is Danish, if people up there have some deeply held feelings about Greenland. Full disclosure, actually, I asked him if the Danes were preparing to get into their longboats and paddle off to defend their king's lands. You know, Viking style. I was imagining a cinematic scene in which I, an American, met Chris somewhere on the frozen Greenlandic tundra, and we looked into each other's eyes and realized that despite our long friendship, we would now have to have an epic man-to-man sword fight to defend our respective nations' honor. But I guess that's probably not going to happen. There'll be no total war between the US and Denmark. Chris says that, quote, nobody gave a shit about Greenland until Trump wanted it. And I kind of doubt that the US is ready to dynamite the NATO treaty by attacking an ally. But you never know. One thing is certain, unless something big changes, the Spanish media is going to be really negative about everything the US does for at least the next 3 years. It's an odd situation for me to be in. I talked about that in my last article and podcast, Life on the Wrong Side of History. So that's that. It's been a few bad months for powerful Spanish men. Most of the sexual harassment accusations these days are against left-wing politicians. I've written and talked about some of that in my article about Spanish sex scandals. That is episode 101 of this podcast. Also in my 2025 year in review, which I guess was 127, episode 127 of this podcast, I made sort of a year in review in which one of the sections was about the fall of the far left, talking about some more of these sexual harassment cases. In any case, I'll keep you updated if anything big happens over there. Once again, we are also talking about whether the European Union is good for anything except drafting strongly worded letters. My opinion is that they're not. It doesn't seem like they have much capacity for action. As we have talked about on here before, the EU is apparently great at creating new layers of bureaucracy and at regulating businesses into oblivion. But they don't seem to do much otherwise. In fact, the letters I've seen about the Greenland issue aren't even strongly worded. They are tepid statements that might contain some half-hearted objection to U.S. annexation, but I don't think anybody really cares that much. The fact is, the EU doesn't have any sort of unified foreign policy, and a lot of European countries don't have large militaries to begin with. But more than that, I don't think that the type of education that young people receive is preparing them to defend Europe as a concept. How many young Europeans are ready to lay down their lives for Ursula von der Leyen and the EU? Probably not many. I am sure some would happily die for their own countries, but not for Europe, and definitely not for Denmark's autonomous overseas territories. I like to end these episodes with quotes from smart people, so here's one from C.S. Lewis. We make men without chests, and expect from them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor, and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. That is from a very short book called The Abolition of Man. In it, Lewis points out that you can get people to believe that all values are subjective and trivial, but you might regret it later when you need someone to go out and defend your country. He wrote the book during World War II when this was not an abstract problem. Since then, though, Europe has had a lot of peace, and people seem to think these days that peace is just how things work. I'm no expert, but it does seem that a lot of human history would say otherwise. Diplomacy works until it doesn't, and at that point, when the barbarians are at the gates and they've ignored your strongly worded letter, you'd better hope you've still got people on your side who believe in a cause greater than themselves. That's about all I've got for today. Thanks for listening. You can head by expatmadrid.com/donate to donate something to this cause. I do this pretty much in my free time when I am not earning a living doing something else. So if you would like to help out, I would appreciate it very much. I will, of course, give you a shout out in a future episode. You could also go to expatmadrid.com/walks. That is the page for Walks Tours, which has tours around very exciting places in Europe. I did the Prado Museum tour with them a couple of years ago. It was great. They let you into the Prado Museum an hour before it's open to the public, and it's an exceptional experience. Anyway, that's at expatmadrid.com/walks. That is an affiliate link, so I'll get a small commission if you buy something there. But you have to use that link for it to work. Similarly, you could go to expatmadrid.com/devour. Devour Tours has food tours in different places in Spain, Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, and San Sebastián, I think, as well as in Italy, France, and other places in Europe. You can go just straight to expatmadrid.com/devour, DEVOUR, and see the full list of options. That's my friend Lauren's company. She founded it 10 or 12 years ago. And the food tours are pretty cool because you get to eat and you also get some culture and history from a tour guide who knows quite a lot about those things. So that is expatmadrid.com/devour. We also have biketourinSpain.com. Raul over at biketourinspain.com has been a supporter of this podcast for quite a while, and he has bike tours in different Spanish regions. I did the Route of Don Quixote with him. Route of Don Quixote is an episode of this podcast. It is episode 76. I also did the Extremadura Wild West bike tour. I'm the one who calls it Wild West. Extremadura is a region in the west of Spain that is not very commonly visited. But this Extremadura bike tour was literally one of the best experiences I've had in over 20 years of life in Spain. So you can check that out. That is episode 94 if you would like to hear about it. Or you could just head right on over to biketourinspain.com and sign up for one of his bike tours. He gives you the bike, he gives you the route. I mean, he's going to take the bike back when you're done with the route, but he gives it to you for the 7 to 10 days that the tour goes on. And all of the hotels are booked for you. All you have to do is feed yourself. So it's really a cool thing, and the prices are pretty good. If you're into more active holidays, then definitely check that out. biketourinspain.com. Make sure you use that URL exactly because there are many imitators, but no company is as good as biketourinspain.com. You could also head over to YouTube and put Learn Spanish with Daniel into the search box. I'm teaching Spanish over there. Pretty self-explanatory. Learn Spanish with Daniel. Lots of things going on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these random thoughts, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much for listening. Hasta la próxima. Bye.